Hello, today I'd like to welcome you to my podcast and hope that you'll be on the healing path from surviving from abuse. And I hope that in these podcasts you'll get some kind of help or comfort, understanding, love. If you're listening to this, you've probably been abused, and I'm really, really sorry, because unless you have been abused, you really don't have any understanding of it. It's not really a subject we can talk about very often, and people are so uncomfortable with it. They really are. And so you're not alone in a sense, because everyone who suffered from abuse, especially sexual, physical or torture, have no one to really talk to in their close inner circle. I feel people really don't know how to handle it, and they don't know what to do. Of course, you can go to therapists and counsellors, and they're all trained. However, it's a kind of a lonely life to have lived that life and then now have that life impacting on you, but you can't really talk about it because no one can cope with it. I mean, you have to cope, but they can't cope. So today I'm just going to talk about remembering it. So there's 3 ways we remember it. Some of us have clear memory. We remember all of it. And unfortunately, that's pretty bad, because having remembered all of it means that it's in our psyche and we always know what happened, and we have that clarity, which in some ways you would think is good, but then you have to live with 100% clarity. The second way is you only remember parts of it. You remember snippets of it. And often they'll call those flashbacks, and you could use that word if you like, but you have some memory of it, but some of the parts are really blurry, and that can be really frustrating because you don't know what happened in the other parts, but you do have some clear memories of it. They flash in and out. And the last one is where you have no memories of it. You can't remember it. You know it happened, and you might have even been told by others that they think it's happened to you, but you can't actually get the memories back. And I think that's kind of the hardest one. In a way, you're immune to it, but in another way, your body's remembering, but your mind can't recall it. The reason you can't remember is because you kind of checked out, and the worse the abuse was, and the longer it was, I think, the more we check out. It's like a survival mechanism that we use. We just go somewhere else. I think they call it dissociation. I'll just use the word checking out because we're just normal little people here. And you don't remember it. So your body takes on the abuse. Your body kind of remembers it because it's impacting on your body quite often and your psyche. But your actual mind, you've kind of left your body and you're not there, and so you can't actually remember it, and you block it out. Now, blocking out works pretty well in this situation, and if you're a person who's had to live in 10 or 12 years of constant abuse, especially sexual, physical, or the torture one, you will find a way to block it out so you can just survive. You'll create another whole fantasy world, a fantasy family. However, that can be just pushing from inside you all the time, and often we will precipitate something. In my case, I had a huge electrical accident when I was 42, and soon after that it just all started coming out. I didn't get all of it at once. I got it in dribs and drabs, but it came out, and there was actually nothing I could do to stop it coming out. If you have had that too, you'll understand. There were some people who didn't believe me because they were like, well, you should have remembered it, and how come you're only remembering it now? But I know, and you would know this too, that when it's so terrorizing and so paralyzing of fear, the fear that you have is so paralyzing that you will actually shut it out. And it's a coping mechanism, because particularly if it's very traumatic to you, you will end up finding a way to handle it. The remembering is what we're talking about today, and the more you remember, I think in some ways the better, because you can actually start to heal from it. When there's all blurry bits, it's much harder to heal from it. I did mine in bits and pieces and kind of downloaded the information bit by bit until I got to the really hard stuff, and in my case that was torture, and that took a long time until I was strong enough to actually deal with it. But then I did, and so I felt I've dealt with that part too. To heal from abuse, you have to face it. You actually do. And there are many people, and you would know these people, who they've been abused, and they will be defiant that it never happened to them, it's only happened to you, and they were never going to go there and they're never going to deal with it. Usually they will manifest illness, they'll get cancers or manifest heart problems, and a lot of them get dementia because they just go to another place because they can't handle what's happening in their whole being. Abuse really messes with you. It really messes with you, and that's why I want to do all these podcasts, because you'll have someone who understands, and you can listen to them and know that you're not alone, because it's a really, really lonely path, and it's really sad, because you realize that that person or those people basically messed your life up, and then you've got to clean up all the mess. There are major feelings that come with abuse. If you've been abused, you'll have a lot of anger about it and hurt. You also have a lot of fear and terror and trauma and resentment. You can have rage, that this happened to you. And you can also have like this constant anxiety that you're never safe, never ever safe, and end up having a lot of phobias as well. It's not your fault. The abuse was not your fault. Someone did it to you. They overpowered you and they did it to you. It was never your fault. And I think if it's happened to you in your childhood, you will actually think you were a bad child or you did something wrong to be treated like this, but it wasn't. Abuse is always at the foot of the abuser. So I want you to really get clear on that while we're going through this healing journey and trying to survive and sort of stick all the bits back together, because that's what we're really doing. You were a good person probably. You didn't deserve to be abused. And even if you got into an untidy situation where you were really drunk and were raped, that was not your fault. That was the fault of the person or persons who raped you. And you need to be really clear on this, because if you don't, you will almost remain a victim to it, and you'll think it's kind of your fault, and it's never your fault. And abuse is all about power and control. There's no love in it. No love in it at all. It's just all about power and control and the other person getting their needs met at the expense of someone else. If you have remembered a lot of it and you can get some help and therapy, I would do that. You can't really always share this stuff with your family or your friends. It's just not a place that they can go, and sometimes you just want to have a little bit of privacy around it too, especially if it's been severe. If you're only remembering bits and pieces of it, you can still get help and counselling. And if you aren't remembering anything but it happened to you, I highly suggest, if you're ready for it, to go and have some breath work or rebirthing. That's what I did, or hypnosis, and see if you can nudge it out so it comes out, so you can get rid of it. There are so many emotions with abuse that you will feel when it starts coming up, and all of them are valid, okay? I used to ask myself, is this old me, like abused me, this crying I'm doing today, or is it in my real life? And I'd find it's from before, and there will be a lot of crying, a lot of tears with abuse, because you're crying all those tears that you couldn't cry, that you held back and were trying to be strong just to get through the actual experience. We'll go through all the different types of abuse. You just do the ones you want to. Don't listen to things you don't want to listen to. And if you're not ready to do some of the parts, just skip it. And I'll tell you about how I've survived it, how I kind of got through it, and also be really honest about all the problems that I had along the way with people in situations and myself. Because when you've been abused, your trust was broken. So there was either broken trust with someone you did trust and love who abused you, or broken trust with some stranger, so trust in humankind basically. But it's a breach of trust, broken trust. You can heal from this. You can. And then you won't need all those things like drinking and smoking and drugs and pharmaceuticals and all the things we do, the shopping, the gambling, to push it down. Because if you've got addictions as well, I want you to go and find my stuff on addiction. I've done quite a few podcasts on that. That's just your pain. That's your pain from the abuse. And a lot of people who've been abused, whether they've dealt with it or not, will have addictions of some sort. So you have to stop being horrible to yourself about your addiction. Addiction is just your way to cope. And once you start coping with all the emotions and release it all and let it go and face it, basically, you'll find that it's easier to get rid of any addictions that you had. So that's my first little podcast, just to introduce myself and to tell you that I really do understand. I probably had most of the bits and pieces with the abuse, so I understand nearly all of them now. Well, actually I do understand all of them now, unfortunately, because of the two major people in my life who were my major abusers. And so I will be talking to you about what worked for me, and if in this I can help you at all in any way to give you hope that you can heal from this and not feel so alone, and also feel like there is light at the end of this terrible tunnel of abuse, then it's a good thing. So be really kind to yourself now and love yourself and stop being mean to yourself. You already had people who've been mean to you, and that's why you're in this mess now, trying to clean up what they did. So don't you be mean to you. It wasn't your fault. It was at their feet. It was completely power and control and abuse of a person. I'm wishing you luck with this. Don't give up, all right? Don't give up. We can heal from this. I've pretty much done it now, but it's been years. It's been a long time, but I've never given up, and I've written a book on it, and now I'm just going to make it into like some personal podcasts to reach more people, because I think it's important. Okay, I'll send you lots of love, lots of healing if you're hearing this, and I'm hoping that we can all heal from our abuse.